Hi, I'm Betsy Rosenberg for another edition of Green TV, this one coming to you from Glasgow once again. Very excited to introduce my next guest. She is a peer. She is a broadcast media professional from way back. And she also, like me, took up the green beat. We've been wondering where everybody is, right? Decades ago, in fact. Well, what can we say? We were ahead of our time. Joan worked for several networks. She's written for many big magazines, Forbes. If I listed them all, she would fall asleep because it's 10 o'clock in Glasgow. And I really appreciate you staying up late for us. Been wanting to get you on now that you've had a few days, or maybe more than a few, to be on the ground in Glasgow. Would just like to start with your general impressions. Is it what you expected? More hopeful, more pessimistic? You know, getting really mixed signals here in the States from reports.
A little of all of the above. I think the biggest frustration is actually with the organization of the event in terms of not having everything in one place, and things written in UN speak. So I gotta cut them a lot of slack because they produced this in the middle of a damn pandemic with 30,000 people from all over the world. And it's hybrid, it's in person, it's virtual. And also the way it's laid out, you have pavilions where you have different countries doing things. And so it's really conferences within conferences within conferences. So it's almost it feels like the length of Manhattan from one end to the other.
Wow. Exercise.
Yeah, no, you do. I'm walking like 4 miles a day. So I really cut them a lot of slack, but the challenge is a lot of the quote big announcements that, you know, reporters they don't even need to really be here because a lot of it is online, and a lot of reporters I know just didn't bother to come for that reason. But the real color is in the pavilions with countries and organizations and alliances, whether it's Race to Resilience with the Atlantic Council, the UN, and a whole bunch of other organizations, or the Coalition for reducing the carbon footprint of the freight transport industry. They did a big announcement to reduce it by 10%, to get to 10%, which is now, by the way, like 0.1. So it's a pretty huge leap in 10 years. And there's companies and countries used it as an opportunity to make a lot of announcements and a lot of commitments. And the fact of the matter is, yeah, they're just words, but they're saying this to 30,000 people and announcing it to a lot of reporters and a lot of people who are going to hold their feet to the fire. So I think that's big. I think the biggest one for me so far, and it may be the prism through which I look, is what is affectionately known as GFANZ, which is the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero. We have to follow the money, right? Money and energy make the world go around. And right. This is 450 companies in 92 countries committing 120 trillion with a T dollars to basically shift the financial system to focus on net zero and not fund dirty industries. And that's going to take some time, right? But yeah. Mark Carney, Michael Bloomberg, and Mary Shapiro. Mark Carney was head of the Bank of England, among other millions of roles like that. Mike Bloomberg doesn't need any introduction. And Mary Shapiro, for people who don't remember, was chair of the SEC. She was head of the Chicago Commodities Future Trading Commission. She was also head of FINRA, which is the other big financial organization. You don't have these people at the top of your heap if you're not bleeping serious.
True. Yeah.
So I'm encouraged about that. I'm also encouraged about the entrepreneur community And a lot of discussion that I've had, and I wrote about this in Forbes, I wrote about GFANs in Forbes, and I wrote about the new, is this kind of a redefined vision for the UN? Because if there was ever a moment when the nations of the world need to be united, we're all sharing the same planet, then this would be it. And we really need that. And I interviewed some pretty interesting people about it. I interviewed Gillian Tett, who was US managing editor of the Financial Times. She's now editor at large and of the FT and chair of their editorial board. I interviewed Sandrine Dixon, who's co-president of the Club of Rome, which is a powerhouse of influential people, former heads of state, CEOs, scientists. She ran the Prince of Wales Foundation, to give you a clue. She's wonderful. I also did an interview with her and with Gillian individually on my website. But I think the other key thing, and this kind of goes to the GFANs thing and ties things together, is we need new metrics. We need new metrics to define what is success in a business or in an economy. We need to flip the economy, the metrics, so that instead of having nature be a tool of the economy is in effect a tool, if you will, of people and the planet. So we need to change a lot of these metrics. And frankly, those changes in metrics will also help women entrepreneurs, because women entrepreneurs still only get 2% of venture capital. I had a robust discussion with John Doerr, who is the grand godfather of venture capital and the parent, if you will, of Kleiner Perkins, about this issue. And so there's a lot of changing. ESG metrics are changing. The SEC has put out public comments. They're looking at putting ESG into audited financial statements now to make a big difference. So, and of course, I talked about the infrastructure bill. Now that it's been signed, now it's been passed, will have a big impact. And President Obama mentioned this, as well as did President Biden at the conference. So the only other thing I'll mention, which you and I have talked about in the past, is too many panels that are all men, too many men. In fact, it's funny, just sort of randomly on the bus, there's this transport of getting people around. And on the bus, some women were, not even to me, but to each other, were saying, God, I'm really annoyed that I kept walking by all these sessions and they were all men. It was like
2021, my goodness. And look where men have gotten us.
I know. And that's, some of the men that are supportive of women say, look, we kind of screwed it up here. Look where we are. So, yeah. And then yesterday I spoke at an event session on entrepreneurs coming together for the green economy. And that was great. There are people from all over the world. And again, there's this issue of metrics and funding, but metrics of what is success as much as what are the metrics you need to get funded. Because when you're looking at doing businesses that preserve nature, you can't look at the same kind of ramp up. You can't look at the same kind of traction. You can't look at, where are you in what stage of the business? And that especially affects women entrepreneurs. So, I think that's kind of the high level version of, a bunch of phrases of things that I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. And did you attend any women's events? I know you have a podcast we should mention, Electric Ladies. So I know that's a particular focus of yours, as it should be, as it is to me too. I don't know how far you got. I know you had a lot of things you wanted to attend that were women focused. I know I saw something yesterday, climate leaders, female climate leaders. I'm going to forget her name, Osprey Lake. I don't know why I forget, Oriel Osprey Lake. I don't know if you were at that one, but that was interesting. And this came up, why are there so few women? And saw one with Julia Jackson of Jackson Winery, and talking about the whole, movement towards soil restoration and regeneration, and it was all women, and that was really refreshing. And that did come up, the fact that this is all too rare, although they did have a male moderator, come to think of it. So what have you experienced there, besides the fact that there's too few of us being represented, but probably more than ever?
Yeah, well, I've been in sessions that were a lot of women. In fact, I was in one today, interestingly enough, on heavy transportation, which was 4 women and 2 men, which was kind of interesting. And that, so that was so you have that too. And this was not a panel about women. They just happened to have that many women. In fact, it was funny at one point, the moderator was a woman from the Aspen Institute, in fact, and I said, I like your ratio, and she started laughing. I didn't attend the event that you're talking about yesterday because I was speaking at other events.
Good for you.
I know it was Gender Day, and so people were kind of talking about that. And there was an event on women in transport, which again, I missed because I was speaking at another event.
Well, good for you. Tell us what you spoke about. Give us highlights from that.
Well, I spoke a few times, and what I spoke about really was, well, first of all, educating to a degree our sisters and brothers in other countries about what's in the infrastructure bill that supports climate change. And also about how funding is done for some entrepreneurial organizations in the United States, particularly on the government side, because a lot of these people were saying they didn't have they needed XYZ kind of funding. And so I mentioned SBIR grants and things like that. But I also mentioned that we need both. We need the top-down approach from regulation, and we need the bottom-up approach where we have people demanding it, whether it's green products or whatever, and that you have to take the time to complain. You know, people complain to each other, and you have what I affectionately refer to as the screaming meanies on both sides of the aisle. But you need constructive complaints, and you need to, go on Twitter or whatever your Instagram or whatever your social media preferences, and both compliment and complain about some of these things. And because they have to listen to that. And frankly, it's in writing, it's social media, but it's in writing. So I also talked about women leading the way. I mean, I believe, and I think maybe you and I have talked about this, but I've written a lot about it. In fact, I'm writing a book about it, but that women are natural innovators, because women have not historically had the authority and the resources to just do things, right, in an organization.
You have to try harder, work harder.
Well, we've had to build the relationships. We've had to find another way. We've had to be resourceful. We've had to build influence in other ways. And that's built innovation muscles. I mean, that's what innovation is. It's find another way.
Mother of invention.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If it's handed to you, you don't find a more creative way to make it work. When you don't
I wouldn't know about that, having tried to do green media for 20 plus years, right? Well, let's hear it for the pioneers, especially the female ones. So speaking, since you do focus so much on the financial side of things, which is so critical and something that frankly I don't focus enough on, what is the sense of the global South not getting enough funding, the developing nations that has been promised? That keeps coming up as a recurring theme, but I don't know that I've seen anything that's been solidified in terms of new commitments, or at least a decision to follow through on the commitments that have been made.
Well, funny you should ask, because they did announce today, and I was pulling it up to talk to you about, and
while you're looking, I'll just say that right before we came on, there was a very encouraging announcement that President of China is going to meet with President Biden, I think as early as next week. And surely this will be part of the conversation. Maybe China heard that people are getting a little fed up with them wanting to be a global leader, but not showing up at, all the major global. Yeah, not to mention they're the primary emitter of emissions.
Yeah, they got a lot of flack for not being here. So, okay. So, 30 countries at the World Leaders Summit, 30 countries agreed to work together to make zero emission vehicles the new normal by making them accessible, affordable, and sustainable in all regions by 2030 or sooner. A number of emerging markets are agreeing to accelerate the transition to zero emission vehicles in specifically emerging markets, India, Rwanda, and Kenya. I'm reading from an announcement from the forum.
Hot off the press. Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. Launch of the new World Bank Trust Fund that will mobilize $200 million over the next 10 years to decarbonize road transport in emerging markets and developing countries. This goal is guiding the Zero Emission Vehicle Transition Council. They love acronyms, ZEVTEC, which will today focus on emerging markets and developing economies to discuss how international collaboration can support their global transition. And 19 governments have also stated their intent to support the establishment of green shipping corridors,
Yes.
through including deploying zero emission vehicles in support of ports around the world, including in developing countries. And so there's more commitment there. I think the bugaboo still is, well, you developed using dirty fuel, why can't we? But what we really want them to do is learn from our mistakes and leapfrog to a clean economy.
I heard some claim that China was saying that they're a developing country, so they shouldn't have to, be part of the ones paying for developing countries. Like, you can't be both. Sorry.
Yeah, I heard that too. I think all it got was a bunch of Snickers, frankly.
Funny and not funny, right? So serious.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll be curious to see I think it's interesting that Xi Jinping decided to do something, because that means they must be feeling a little bit of the heat, pardon the pun, and they must have been feeling a little bit guilty, because every session I've been in, it's been commented that China and Russia are not present.
And I would say that they probably don't feel a little bit. It takes a lot, and there is a lot of heat on them right now. And I think that's what it took finally, for them to realize it, because they don't take nuance well.
They don't, and they're also big on branding. And so when they see their brand getting tarnished, I saw graphics today in this session about the use of dirty fossil fuel transport in those countries. And I got to tell you, the biggest ones were China and Russia. China and Russia. So I can send you some slides if you really want your eyes to glaze over, but
well, yours are probably going to glaze over. You've been at this how many days now?
14 to be precise. 2 weeks.
Wow.
So
is it energizing and exhausting? Probably both.
It is. That's exactly right. It's energizing and exhausting. By the way, since we are Americans, I've connected with a lot of Americans. One of the sessions today was led by a woman who heads up, in effect, heavy transport for the California Air Resources Board. So that was kind of fun to see her. I used to work for Chrysler's Global Electric Motor Cars, and Mary Nichols, who's the head of CARB, has been driving our cars forever.
Yeah, I remember her.
There's this
campaign called Don't Be Fueled, Mothers for Clean and Safe Vehicles, back in 2002. And we interviewed her quite a bit. And yeah, she's been at this.
She's great. Yeah, she's a treat.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot, I'm impressed with the business community stepping up. There's this whole business pavilion you can't see it, but business pavilion for climate leadership. There's also been a lot on kids. There's this, obviously Obama spoke to kids yesterday, day before, but also there are a lot of kid of course they had the protests of only 100,000 people in Glasgow City Central
demonstration.
Yeah, but 2 of them, Friday and Saturday. But the other thing is that there's a whole wall. I did a video today of a wall of letters from children about wanting education to reflect climate change, and wanting, their adults to do something about it and things like that, which I thought was very encouraging. So, but they're having to clean it up.
No, that's been my focus. My target audience has not been the young people. It's because they get it. It's fellow adults, boomers, because they're pleading with us to do something. Maybe we need to educate the adults first. Well, that's part of what GreenTV is all about. I have to ask you before I let you go, because I'm sure you're tired, and really appreciate you joining us late hour for you. This this revelation that the biggest delegation there is the fossil fuel industry. Has that percolated there? Because that was like yesterday's news. I don't know if Democracy Now! Broke that, but I heard it first there. It's really disappointing to hear that. Maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but what do you make of that?
I had not heard that.
Yeah, I think
That's
like
not
500 something delegates from representing fossil fuel industry, and that was the largest delegation of, formal delegations, I guess.
Well, I'm not surprised because they have the strongest delegation on K Street, lobbying Capitol Hill, which is why we only got $555 billion for climate change in the infrastructure bill, and why the other one is, we'll get a lot. It's a lot better than it would have been without it. But they put a lot of money into this. They know how to work this system.
Clearly, they've been very successful at the expense of
and they've been doing it a long time, and they've been doing it successfully. And so I haven't really paid attention to those kinds of things. I've been paying attention to what's really going on the ground. And just because they have the largest delegation there, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get the largest piece of the pie, because people are pissed off at them.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that they even self-identified as that, but maybe there's some formal process where you have to. Well, I would love to be a fly on the wall in those meetings, see, do they actually have the chutzpah to be still doing their, profit first only over planet?
Well, they're all saying they're investing in renewable energy, and they're, cleaning up their act.
Publicly, yeah, saying that. Mm-hmm.
But BP declared they were going to be net zero by, I think it's 2040. I can't remember, maybe 2035. So when a friend of mine who's a senior executive there told me that, I said, so does that mean you're getting out of the oil and gas business?
Beyond petroleum, wasn't that what they tried to make BP?
Yeah, it used to be before the Gulf of Mexico oil spill, and then they had to give that up.
Yeah.
So I think they should have a big seat at the table, because they're the biggest problem, and they need to have. I don't hate the oil companies, because we need everybody at the table, and you can't influence people if either you or they are not at the table. So
and also, we're all using fossil fuels right now. We're all part of the problem. We're using it because we don't have better choices, and that's what we need to do, is have systemic change, obviously. So no, I think to vilify the fossil fuel industry is too simplistic. And so one of my few complaints with Jane Fonda, she thinks it's all fossil fuel industry's fault. And I put some blame on mainstream media, which has neglected to take up the beat as seriously as we have. But we're all part of it. We all have to make these changes, despite their desire to continue with their successful products, shall we say, indefinitely. So any last thoughts before I let you get some sleep?
I'll be curious to see what the final announcements are on Friday and Saturday. I'll be on a big silver bird, so I won't necessarily see them in real time. But and they're trying to finish by close of business on Friday. I don't know if they will, but it's more important that they get the right kinds of commitments than that they just, punch a time clock. So I'll be curious to see what other commitments come out of it, and how the mechanisms are put in place to track these.
Yes.
And this is where the UN, to the point of the story I wrote today, really has an opportunity to have a new mission and be energized. There's plenty of criticism of the UN, and deservedly so, but it is the only body where everybody comes together. And even though they have no enforcement capacity, they have the convening capacity, the negotiation capacity, and the opportunity to facilitate holding countries and companies accountable. But importantly, when they create these big forums and people come together and make these announcements publicly, the public holds them accountable, and the people like us in the press hold them accountable.
I think that is the biggest, most hopeful takeaway, is that more people than ever are watching in the world. Like this one feels so different from 2 years ago.
Well, I think more people than ever realize that it's a big problem, whether it's because they've personally experienced more extreme weather, or because the science is finally getting through, or because when people were home with COVID for the last 2 years, they actually brushed up on some of this stuff and realized it was for real. But whatever or the other interesting thing is what COVID did was help us understand that we need to respect science. The people who don't respect science learned to respect science.
Science and nature, she the boss.
Absolutely.
Remember, you're my age. You probably remember that commercial. I think it was for Lay's potato chips somehow. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. And I'm not sure
Oh
what
God, I haven't heard that in a long
but
time.
now my version has been, it's not nice to fuel Mother Nature. And we're seeing that she's pissed and who can blame her, and trying to send a really big, loud message. And it appears we're finally getting it. Let's hope it's not too little too late.
Well,
So,
the only other thing I'll say is it was supposed to rain for 2 weeks solid in Glasgow. And the good news is it's hardly rained at all. It's been a bit chilly, but lovely every day.
and the other bit of
So
good news is it's raining again on the West Coast. They're having another atmospheric river, which is too much rain, but a couple weeks after they had the first one that broke the drought. So yeah, we've not only fooled her and fueled her, but confused her, because nothing is normal anymore. But
Right.
that is the bad news is the good news, right? That more people are aware that something is wrong, that things are off. And of course, that's only the part that we can feel, we humans. The critters out there hate to think, they must really be confused. Thanks so much for clarifying and keeping us the opposite of confused, informed. Really appreciate it. And just one last thought on Scotland. Have they been wonderful hosts, and are they happy to have you there?
Oh yeah, they've been great. Everybody's been really helpful. Everybody's been joking about the fact that we need to make them repeat what they say 4 times, because a lot of times their accents are so thick. One of the things I love about these things and the cities that you and I live in and have lived in is the whole international vibe. You never quite know who you're sitting next to from where, and all different parts of the world, which is grand. So yes, they've been lovely hosts.
Because there was a lot of controversy about whether they should even host it given COVID, but I'm so glad they did.
Well, they do make us test every single day.
Really?
You
That's a
can't
lot
go,
of
yeah,
tests.
you have to show up. You can't get in without a PCR test. And then you have to do these, they give us boxes when we come in of the daily lateral flow test. And then to leave, we have to get a PCR test.
Well,
I got mine this morning.
Thank you for that sacrifice. I'm sure it's a little inconvenient. But that's the way they felt they had to do it to keep everybody safe and comfortable.
Well,
So,
it makes me feel safer too, because everybody else had to go through the same. I mean, 30,000 of my new friends had to go through it too.
absolutely. Well, my gardener's lawnmower is starting up. We have grass in Texas, which I never had in California, but came with the house. So I'll let you go. Thanks again, Joan. And we'll be hopefully hearing from you back in the States on some other issues, but this is an important one. We really appreciate you bringing it to us.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Have a good night.
You too.
Ciao.
And we'll
Bye-bye.
see you next time for Green TV. Thanks for joining us.